Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Men After God podcast. I'm excited to continue recording outside of studio for a bit. Just got some things happen there and not in there. I've got some things going on in life, but I'm grateful for the software and for our guests to be able to connect with me, even in this type of scenario. This week, we've got a fantastic guest on with us. His name is Kevin Baxter, and what an amazing backstory he's got that you're going to hear in just a minute. And I love his focus of bringing content that's wholesome and that's challenging to children and Christian parents alike to help us as parents to better raise our kids. And we're going to talk today about that content and about what it means to help your kids know who they are and to be able to live from that identity in Jesus. But before we get into all that, let's first meet Kevin and hear about him and his life. Kevin, thanks so much for being on with us today, man. Why don't you tell us about yourself and a little bit about your family?
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for having me on. So I live out here in Orange County, California, and married to my beautiful wife of 37 years, Claire. Today's our anniversary, so this is an anniversary.
And he scheduled this interview on his anniversary. Yes. I didn't schedule this interview, so Claire, that's his fault, not mine. Just so we're clear, all right?
Yes. And we were blessed with two wonderful daughters that we raised up, and now they're in their early 30s, and my oldest daughter is actually now married and has two wonderful grandsons. And so now I'm enjoying the season of being a grandpa. And that's nothing gets better. Two little grandsons to play around with.
Amen. No, I love that. You know, I hear grandkids are the reward for being able to parent your own kids, and because you get all the fun without any of the responsibility. I mean, in a sense of having to deal with the discipline or anything of that nature. Like, nope, that's mom and dad's problem. You just get to hype them up on Mountain Dew and Cheetos and then send them home.
Yes. And after I loved raising two daughters, it was a wonderful thing for you dads of daughters out there. If you're familiar with the game, Pretty Princess, where dad's got to wear all the makeup as the go around the board game. I had lots of girl games with my daughters, but now I get two little grandsons, and so it's a whole different thing. Just playing ball and tractors and dinosaurs and the whole thing.
Oh, that is awesome. I got two boys and a girl, and so with my girl being my youngest, I think she was heavily influenced by the boys and the toys and stuff they had. So I've never actually had to have a princess day with her, but we've definitely played and have fun, and it's been a good time. But and so Kevin, now you raised these two girls, and you've been married for 37 years, and we were talking before we got on here. You came into the career world, your career as a lawyer, and what was that experience like for those that are listening here? Because I mean, you hear the term lawyer, and there's so many different types of law and practice and things like that. What was it like getting into law? And then what type of law was it that you practiced?
Yeah, so I practiced law for a little over 30 years. And I worked I started out in what they call big law, a big international law firm. And my area of expertise was really venture capital, business law, corporate law, technology law, helping startup companies basically grow. And the hope was that eventually they grow their company and successful products and services and get sold or go through an IPO process. And so that was kind of my area of expertise. And from a spiritual standpoint, it was really kind of an elixir that I thought would bring me happiness, but it was really a poison that was destroying my soul. And
that's good.
And I really strove for achievement, careerism. I guess I would accuse myself of being subject to careerism. And I thought finding the career and pursuing success in career was the purpose in life, was the meaning of life. And it had, adverse consequences to my health of my marriage and my relationship with my kids as a father of two young daughters. I can't tell you the number of vacations I missed because I was working a deal over a weekend and couldn't go with the family on a vacation.
Oh, wow.
There was one moment in particular where we had Indian Princess, where dads and daughters would go out for fun weekend adventures and things like that. and we had a Catalina trip from Southern California. You take an hour boat ride to get to Catalina Island, and I was supposed to spend a whole weekend with my daughter, and I had to cancel. I thought I had to cancel, and so another dad graciously took my daughter out there, and I look back on it now, and what a horrible decision, as a dad,
Oh, yeah.
to put work before my daughter and the weekend of joy that I could have experienced with her and the memories we could have had together. And so that just gives you a picture of kind of how deep I was into careerism, as I call it. And fortunately, God, found me, and he hit me over the head and drew me back to him.
Yeah, amen. And that, I say we all, I'm a kindred spirit there with you. I've definitely made decisions of, as a pastor, it's easy to make those excuses of like, I'm doing the work for the Lord. Like I have to do this. I have to give my time over to these things. But truthfully, as a lawyer, as a pastor, as anyone, no, you have 100% control over that. And you can make the choice to not be involved in your career, whatever it might be, over your family. And it may require some sacrifice of your career, but truly it would be better. And I think, Kevin, you could speak to this better than I can just due to your experience. It's better to sacrifice your career than it is to sacrifice your family.
Absolutely. Looking back on it, I would have made the opposite decision each and every time I ran across those types of decisions I had to make, is that those weren't those things I thought were so important. They had no eternal value. And the things that I missed because of those choices, those are the things that had eternal value.
And now you're in law, you're in big law, and you were telling me about a moment where you worked with a big law in your firm. You worked with a big company that did have an IPO, and you got to be there at NASDAQ headquarters for that. Talk about that experience for a moment and how that was kind of a turning point for you.
Yeah, it was really an epiphany where this is where I say God hit me over the head, that I had spent about 6 years in big law, and then I got recruited to join a company in-house. So in-house counsel was another career path you could take as a lawyer. And I rose to the position of general counsel. So you're basically managing the legal department. And this was a high-flying, high-tech company. I thought it was great. And we went public. This is back in 2000 during the dot-com craze. And we went public on NASDAQ, and I flew back to New York from California with the management team, and we celebrated this IPO, and everybody's in the NASDAQ headquarters and all these monitors, the financial boards and whatnot that are kind of part of NASDAQ. And everybody's just elated that we've achieved this milestone. And I just remember sitting in this dark room by myself, kind of away from everybody else, and just being morose, just being unhappy, unsatisfied, like, okay, I'm supposed to be on the top of Mount Everest of my career, so to speak, but I have this deep emptiness and feeling of aloneness, that I haven't really achieved anything, that God was really telling me that you're chasing the wrong thing. You're pursuing the wrong thing. This is not what I have for you. And it really was the opening of my eyes that God was bigger than all that. And he wanted more for me and something different for me. And that I misaligned my priorities all along the way for, 30 some years.
Wow. And so I have a question when it comes to the IPO NASDAQ. When I think of NASDAQ headquarters, I'm obviously thinking of the big stock exchange floor and then the bell ringing and stuff. Like, is that where you were at?
Yeah. I mean, there's different exchanges, but NASDAQ is typically where the high tech companies will go out. That's the exchange that most high tech companies utilize. Okay. And so, we were in this, it's all a real celebratory party atmosphere, and everybody was elated, and I just had this sadness that I had missed the boat.
Wow. Wow. That is awesome. And now from that, you said that you went from this 30 years practice of law to having this experience. And then how did that turn into, and how long has that been that that you transitioned into, kind of what you do now?
Yeah. So after that moment, I really kind of reoriented my life. I got involved in Bible study and pursuing God through scripture, prayer, just serving at my church, just being much more committed to him as my first priority. And then flowing from that, my marriage is my second priority and my kids, my third priority. And he just totally, renovated my life and for the good, for his glory. And so what it did from a career standpoint is I had to find a different way to make money. I knew that being in a corporate setting, I was always going to be pleasing people. And so I started my own firm, and I'm a horrible marketer. So I couldn't, I couldn't find a client in a room full of tech companies. So God blessed me with clients, and he blessed me with provision of a way to make a living through my own firm. And what it did for me is it put me in control of my decisions and priorities. So for me, that's what was necessary, to step out of the peer pressure of pleasing others and to have my own enterprise that I could say, no, God's first, my family's first, my career is second. And so that's what I spent the last 15 years of my legal career doing. And then in terms of how I shifted into writing is my one of my wonderful daughters has gotten married with a wonderful man, and they've now got two little sons, my grandsons. And as I started to see them raising up a family, it's a real blessing to see your kids enjoy the fruit of having children. As somebody who's raised up kids, to then see your own kids loving and appreciating God's gift of children is just a wonderful thing. But it started to get me thinking and looking at what is it like to raise up a family to love God in today's culture. And living out in California, there's lots of crazy stuff going on legislatively and otherwise. So it's hard. It's harder today to raise up a Christian family than it was, back when I was doing it 30 years ago. And I felt a sadness for Christian moms and dads, trying to find ways to teach their children to love God in a culture that in many ways is hostile towards God. Yeah. And so rather than get into advocacy and fighting the culture fight, I decided, God's given me this gift of writing. I think I've got some kind of imagination, and I wanted to create just good, clean content, fiction content for kids that are safe, families can trust, but they teach you something about God. They dive deeper into who God is and who we are as being made in his image. And to help, my goal in all this is for kids to love God and to live with confidence, courage, and peace of mind about their faith. So whether it be in the schoolyard, the sports team, or other places, if somebody's challenging their faith, for them to have confidence of who they are as a image bearer of God.
I absolutely love that. And what I love most is, while I think all parents, everything you just said, there's no Christian parent I know who would look at you and go, you know what? That's not what I'm looking for. I want something else, right? The big question is always, how do we do that? And I loved what we were talking about before we came on to record. Your kind of philosophy is what I'm going to say there, of how to help a child be able to do that, or even ourselves as parents. And so kind of dive into that for just a minute, of where it really starts of getting a child to live out those things you just talked about.
Yeah. So for me, and this comes out as themes in my story, but to me, it starts with knowing who God is. And that he's the author and creator of all that's good, beautiful, and true in the world. And to appreciate his majesty, his transcendence, his glory, his beauty, his goodness, his love for us. So starting with that love of God and knowing God, and then understanding that he loves us so much that he created us in his image, to bear his image, to be his ambassadors, his representatives. That gives the kids this tremendous empowering feeling of the whole God of the universe has made me like him. What can't I do, right? What can't I accomplish in his name?
Yeah. That is beautiful. I love that, because as Men After God, that's our whole thing of being able to achieve success with a thriving faith and family. And that success is really defined as faithful obedience to God. And it all starts with understanding who he is and who he's created you to be. And then how do you live that out? And it sounds like that's really what you're hoping to communicate through some of your writing, and to parents, is that same principle of knowing God, knowing who you are because of God, and then how to live that out. When you mentioned parenting 30 years ago and parenting now, Help us understand what some of those stark differences might be, and then your writing, and then maybe some other things that you think parents could be doing or be engaged in to help their kids be raised in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Yeah, and so part of my answer is going to be geographic specific. I
Sure.
don't pretend to understand all of America, but coming
Yeah.
from California, we're kind of on the leftward coast, in terms of worldview.
Yeah.
And so I actually went to the trouble to read like the last decade's worth of legislation that's been adopted or considered and then passed in
Oh
California
my.
dealing
Wow.
with public schools. And it's been,
Yeah.
10 or 15 different laws.
Hmm.
And each one is diminishing the rights of parents,
Mm.
diminishing kind of information that the parents are entitled to related to their children, and diminishing the rights of Christians in particular to prioritize their Christian worldview with their kids. And now California is even actually moving into what's called family law. So away from so the rationale was, oh, okay, I'm just not going to send my kids to public school. I'm going to send them to a private Christian school or homeschool. But now California is starting to pass laws in the family code, and that means it's not school specific. It's basically if Child Protective Services is called into your house, then California can come in and do what they want to do, regardless of whether you send your kids to private school. So, but to your question about comparison, back 30 years ago, it was relatively safe, at least in Orange County, to send your kids to a public school and have that be a safe environment that was maybe religion neutral, or at least friendly to a Christian view in terms of study of the holidays, or if a kid wanted to write a story about something they read in the Bible, the teacher wouldn't see it as wrong. And so back when I was raising my two daughters, the public sphere was much more friendly to the Christian worldview and raising up your kids in the Christian worldview. And we'd see teachers at church, and it was, a community that you felt safe in. And now you just see more and more so that different institutions in California, at least, are being taken over by a worldview that is hostile to, Judeo-Christian worldview. What we understand about who God is as our creator and our savior through Christ, and who we are as made in his image, and what it means to love and live obediently to his commands. All of that is really being challenged in the public sphere of so many areas. So it's harder for Christian parents to know, how do you get your kids involved in school and sports and social clubs, knowing that any of them can present a danger to your child's understanding of the world and who they are as God's children.
Yeah, I'm very thankful and blessed to have our kids in a private Christian school, and we are in Connecticut. And honestly, I always tell people Connecticut's like California light. Like we're a few years behind you in the leftist agenda and things of that nature, and as it applies to the worldview and what happens in schools, very similar stories I hear from parents and things going on here. And so it's so important if Christian education or a homeschool environment is not an option for a family, that they've got to make intentional effort as parents to first be followers of Jesus themselves, and then to bring their family along on their journey with Jesus. And great ways to do that of not just Bible reading and prayer together as a family, but also with the great Christian content like you've produced with the Kingdom in the Redwoods. Is that right? Yes. Wanted to make sure I said
Yes.
that right. Kingdom in the
Yes.
Redwoods book that you're in. I was about to call it a novel, but I don't know if that's the right terminology. And so there it is. I love that cover design. That's beautiful. And so to our guys listening on audio, make sure
Thank
you
you.
check out the show notes and get the link there to purchase that and support Kevin and his writing there, and help your kids enjoy a fantastic story. Which, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about this book and some of the story there and the themes that we can see. And I will say before you get started, for our guys listening, I was doing my research on Kevin, looking up a couple things, and I noticed someone compared his writing to C.S. Lewis's. So I'm real excited to dive into this when I get my book.
Yes, and speaking of C.S. Lewis, the influences behind this book, the idea, the story, there's a couple C.S. Lewis works that your listeners may be familiar with. Is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is,
Right.
your prototypical fantasy of allegory of God. And then the Screw Tape Letters is the other side of the coin, right? It's how does the enemy work? What are his machinations to get us to turn away from God? And so my story is really influenced by both of those sides of the coin from C.S. Lewis. And then there's also an influence. This is more for your kind of seminary academic nerds, but there's a great book on the image of God by Anthony Hoekema.
Okay.
That really goes into kind of a detailed look at how scholars have seen what does it mean to be made in the image of God? Because the book really kind of gets into some detail to help kids understand the way Christian tradition has thought about what it means to be made in the image of God. Does that mean like he gave me brown hair because he has brown hair? Or is there something deeper in that message, right?
Yeah.
And then the last influence is a theologian, Richard Niebuhr, who wrote a book called Christ and Culture. And he analyzed, first century Christ living in the Roman occupied, kind of Roman Empire and the Jewish religious leadership place he lived out his ministry is how did he interact with that culture? And Niebuhr kind of writes different perspectives about, was he a zealot who was against it? Was he living outside of it because he was just a purity like the Essenes were? I mean, kind of how did Christ do that? And he was really transforming the culture through the hearts, right? So each of those works is kind of woven into the story in terms of theological message, but the story is for kids. I'd say 9 to 13 is kind of the sweet spot of who might enjoy the story in terms of the age of the characters and the storyline that they're in. And it's a family of 3 kids, Aaron, Benji, and Hannah. Aaron's 12, Benji's 10, and Hannah's 8. And they are living in a world that's lost its way. That's how the story opens. And there's liars and cheaters and just plain mean people that they're grappling with. And each has to grapple in their own way. Hannah's fearful. She kind of isolates and is afraid of the bullies in her school. So she's got this fear about the world she's living in. Benji's a guy that he's a clever kid. He sees the angles. He's the middle kid. He's clever. And he compromises. He sees something he can get if he maybe makes, a little bit of a moral compromise, and he's willing to do it because he wants to get that, And then the oldest kid is Aaron, who's 12, and he's a striver. He's got a good moral compass, but he doesn't trust others. He doesn't trust God. He doesn't trust others. He wants to do it on his own. And it leads him into trouble because he's just a lone ranger. And so each of these kids starts the story with that setting. And then they get invited to their grandparents' ranch for a Christmas break. And it's no ordinary ranch. It's high in the snow-covered mountains. It's this beautiful, 1,000-acre ranch up in the snow-covered mountains. And there's something secret about this ranch. And there's something mysterious. And the grandpa who takes them on tour of the ranch shows them this stand of redwood trees that's got a deep family history. And through this stand of redwood trees, they discover this new world. And this new world is governed by this King Yasha, who is benevolent. And what they learn, I don't want to give you a lot of spoilers, what they learn through the story is that this king he's an artist. He's a master artist, and he makes paintings. And every day is a painting of King Yasha. And that painting is good and beautiful and true. And it's how this kingdom operates. Is basically his paintings become the reality of that kingdom. And so the kids are learning about who King Yasha is as they tour this kingdom. And he shows them his paintings, and he shows them what is good and beautiful and true. But there's this other side of the kingdom. It's the Shadowlands side, and it's dark. And there's a character named Malby who's the enemy, the antagonist in the story, if you will. And he's got a whole different idea. He used to be a gardener for King Yasha, but he thought he was better. He thought he was better suited to lead the kingdom. And so through this rebellion, King Yasha had to expel him to the far corners of the kingdom, and that's how Shadowlands came into existence. And now he's an enemy of King Yasha, and he wants to destroy the kingdom and the king. And he's got plots and plans to do it. And so King Yasha calls on these three kids, Aaron, Benji, and Hannah, to take on a mission to find out what the plan is of Malby and to stop it. They have to kind of save the kingdom. And through this process, they learn more about who King Yasha is, and they learn, more importantly, about who they are as made in his image. And through this, I don't want to say how it all ends, but
no, don't give that away.
King Yasha trusts them with this great mission, and he empowers them. And through that, they develop a sense of heroics to be able to take on a dangerous mission for the king.
Man, I love that, and I hear the parallels between Christ and then obviously Satan, and us living that life and being torn, or not torn, but being in the middle, if you will, and having to. I can just imagine what they're going to go through and what they're going to face, and the stories and lessons that we can teach our kids just through that. And so, with this first publication, which again, congratulations on. I know that's not an easy task. And so what's the future plans? Do you expect that you'll write more? Is this going to be kind of a series you do, or will you do other stories? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I've got a sequel that's currently with my editor called, the working title is Kingdom in Peril. And it continues in the same kingdom and the same three kids, but there's a new character that's added, Nixie. And Nixie has just lost her father, a military hero who died in serving the country. And so she's suffering from a sadness of losing her best friend, her father. And Aaron and Aaron's looking for a best friend because they moved to the ranch, and he's got to develop a whole new set of friendships now that they've moved. And so she's the least likely candidate to be a best friend. He's athletic and outgoing, and she's suffering grief, and she's also blind. But he looks and sees something deeper in her, a deeper beauty, a deeper substance that he wants to get to know. And so he invites her to visit the kingdom with him and his brother and sister, and they get called into another crisis. Malby has risen with a new plot, a new idea. And the theological theme of the second book is really about what does it mean when we talk about God's everlasting kingdom and everlasting life. And again, no spoilers, but the kids learn what it means to be part of the everlasting kingdom.
That is great. I love that. I love that. We started off kind of talking about the differences between parenting 30 years ago and parenting now, and then especially how you have made decisions differently, hindsight's 2020, if you will, and forsaken the corporate world for the joys of parenting. And I'd love to hear along some of those same lines, like what are some things you would say to Christian parents today, and dads especially, about parenting? And again, I know you can speak to the specificity of parenting daughters. Utilizing resources like what you have, like what are some things, specific things, if you will, other than just forsaking work to be with family, but that you would do to help them grow and know God better today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Dustin. And I'll give you a few ideas just off the top of my head. One is that it helped me be a better father and a better husband to be involved in a strong men's Bible study. And I've been in one for 20 years, and just sharing the struggles of what it means to be a dad, to be a husband, and to get encouragement, to get counsel, to have people to kind of spill your guts out when things seem to be falling apart and you need help, and to pray together. So that was kind of a center of my life over the last kind of 20 plus years. Another thing that has been very valuable to me, and I've done it with my daughters, and now I'm doing it with my grandsons, is to set up traditions where God is the center of that tradition. And for me with my daughters, every night, despite my mistakes about some of my career priorities, I did manage to get home to read to them before bed. And so we read, the books I was referring to, C.S. Lewis, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. We read, good Christian literature, fun fiction every night before bed. And that became a tradition, where they would look forward to bedtime because there would be, 30 minutes of just reading a chapter or two of a story. And I just think it helps your kids see that you love God. When your kids see how much you love God, then there's a natural affinity that they want for God as well, because they love their parents, and their parents are the representatives of God in their life. I see God through my parents is what the kid's thinking, right? And so trying to reflect our love for God by the traditions we set up with our kids.
I love that. I think that's phenomenal. And you mentioned you're reading books, obviously utilizing C.S. Lewis's stuff, and then now, your content that's being put out there and things. Are there any other traditions other than like a bedtime routine? Is there any traditions that you had or that you have now with your grandkids, or that you could recommend? Maybe you've seen or heard from other men that you think were just, wow, that would be really cool to have that with my family.
So my grandsons are now 3 and 1. So that gives you some age perspective on the types of activities we might do. But I'm starting to pray with my 3-year-old grandson, and he feels sad about something. And so we'll pray. I'll say, anytime you're sad, Baxter, you can talk to God. He's there all the time. He's with you all the time. He loves you, and he wants to hear from you. Whether you're sad, you're angry, all the feelings you have, God wants to hear it. So I'd say, help your kids understand that there's an open line of communication that they can have with God, and God wants there to be there with them and for them, is one. And then another area is I'm really a big believer that God's created each of us, equipped each of us with different gifts and different abilities and different passions and loves. And not everyone's going to have the same lane in life, right? God's created us uniquely. And so really take the time to study our kids, our grandkids, and just to see who they are as little image bearers. How's God made them? Has he made them sensitive heart? Has he made them bold and courageous? Has he made them creative? Has he made them funny? I mean, all the little things God's woven into their soul and their heart, to be a student of that as a parent or grandparent, and to take the time to just get to know them as God has made them. And that will help you mentor to them how best to develop those gifts, skills, passions, and abilities.
That is phenomenal. That is great, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time today, man. It has just been great to get to know you, to hear about your book and your journey, and this fantastic advice that you've just given to parents here in these last few minutes. And so, men, you've been blessed today. Be sure to check out our show notes and check out the links and stuff for Kevin's things, and also the other books that he referenced. If you're interested in C.S. Lewis works, the Screw Tape Letters, or the Lion of Witch's Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia series, or anything else there that was mentioned, I know we'll have that there. And just want to say thanks again, Kevin, for your time. And thank you guys for listening. Men After God, we love you. We're so thankful for you. And don't forget, available on Amazon now is Becoming a Man After God, a biblically based framework to achieve success with a thriving faith and family. I'd love for you to check that out on Amazon. Grab a copy for you, Men's Bible Study. And any questions, you can always reach out to us, facebook.com/Men After God podcast, or facebook.com/groups/Men After God. And we'd love to connect you with our network of men, over 600 to 700 strong now, and just continuing to grow as we want to help men achieve success with a thriving faith and family. Thanks again, Kevin. It's been great to have you. Thanks, guys, for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/Men After God. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.